Thanks, folks. All right, what do I do, you know? What do I do after that? My goodness. So I said to Kellyanne, what do I do? And she whispered something in my ear. So I said, I'm just going to do it. So as the president walked out, I said, thanks for warming up the crowd for me. He's from Queens, I'm from Brooklyn. You know, we talk like that, so you know. Anyway, I used to follow Ronald Reagan. I guess I can follow Donald Trump. I am proud to be here. I want to fill in a couple of blanks. It would be an affectation for me to take you off into a whole different topic. So let me comment some on what our president said and some of the things that he has said and done. First of all, I love the digressions of the president. Mrs. Frankfurter, Justice Frankfurter's wife, used to say of her husband, Felix makes two mistakes when he speaks. First, he digresses from his text. Second, he returns to it. I love the president's digressions, and I've told him, I said, you got great speechwriters, but I love it when you go off script. And you see we say the authentic Queens guy, you know? I like that authentic Queens guy. And anyway, it's great. And the times are changing, he said. Get out your Bob Dylan, you remember? The times they are changing. Don't stand in the doorway. Don't block up the halls, members of Congress, because the times they are changing. All right, let's change them. It's great to see the energy and vigor of our president. I want to say something I said on TV at Fox a couple of weeks ago about the president and the First Lady visiting Texas and Florida and Puerto Rico and Las Vegas. I remember a book I read when I was in school called The Lord. It was written by an Italian theologian named Romano Guardini. And he said, God hears every suffering, the suffering of every creature in the world. And if we could hear the suffering of every creature in the world, it would overwhelm us. It would kill us. I remember I never forgot that passage. And it occurred to me that as the president and Mrs. Trump went to Florida and Texas and Las Vegas and Puerto Rico, they heard a good chunk of the suffering of the world, didn't they? And they saw a good chunk of the suffering of the world. And you know that that moved them and affected them. And I cannot stand these critics and cynics who criticize the president for his efforts on behalf of the people there. It is just ridiculous. He went... And they said, well, what about throwing paper towels? I said, that's what he does. That's the Queens guy. You understand? This is how we show affection at somebody. In Brooklyn, we throw something at them or for them. And this ridiculous business on Puerto Rico that CNN is obsessed with now, I watch CNN so you don't have to, that, you know, that people can't be there forever. First responders can't be there forever. Okay, let's parse that sentence. First responders can't be there forever. First responders? Okay, it kind of makes sense, doesn't it? But remember, before this horrible storm, there was a little bit of a problem with Puerto Rico and its credit. And what the president wants to make sure is that while supplying all this help and all this assistance to Puerto Rico, that it does not think of itself as just a total dependent of the federal government, because that would be wrong and that would be a mistake. Great example, Florida and Texas. They do not regard themselves, those two states and those two governors, as federal dependents, and neither should Puerto Rico. They need all the help we can give them, and we're giving it to them, and then they need to clean up their own act, fiscally and financially. At the same time that the president and the first lady were hearing these tales and seeing these folks, they have undergone the most unprecedented media assault in American history. And I know something about media assaults in American history. I got some. I see my friend Gary Bauer. He got some. We got some together. Dan Quayle got some. The Bushes got some. But never has there been anything like this. Never has it been so one-sided. So speak up for him. Speak up for him. Of course, yes, right. Harvard study of the media's coverage of Trump's first 100 days found that CNN and NBC's coverage of Trump was 93% negative. And that was from Harvard, so it's probably worse. They were probably trying to soften the medicine here. If you watch the TV shows other than Fox, and I think that's really true, you would have no idea how many things the president has already accomplished. Let me just go through a few and comment. I want to start with a symbolic one, but it's also a real one, and that's the National Football League. As a patron of football, former player, semi-pro player for one game, Mississippi. Anyway, big enough, too slow. Anyway, and as a patriot, the president has won on this issue. He's just won. Right. Jerry Jones is having all his players stand. The commissioner is singing this tune as well, and that is a good thing. The president knows and has stated what you all know and believe. We stand for the anthem. We kneel before God. But whatever you might want to say about these players who were kneeling, who were protesting, I think I have a little inside information. I'll share it with the president. A lot of them don't know any better. They just don't know any better. They are alien to themselves in a culture and a country they do not understand. Who has ever told them that America is the last best hope of earth? Who has ever told them about the sacrifices at Gettysburg or Yorktown? Who's ever told them about that Naval Memorial, the Marine Memorial, as we call it, I, the father of a Marine, out there? Yeah, hoorah! The raising of that flag on Mount Suribachi. I don't think they've been taught it. I know they haven't been taught it. I've been in the schools, and they haven't been taught it. And how many of our problems go back to that? Plato said, two fundamental questions in society. Who gets to teach the children, and what do they teach them? And that still remains the question. And I'll take this audience teaching my children, thank you, rather than many others. Stepping on my applause lines, I know, but I got a lot to get through. I want to get through it. I'll tell you about a study you probably haven't heard. I was fascinated by this. Take American students, 13 and 14 years old, this was a big study done in California, whose parents were born in another country. When asked to identify what they were nationally, these 13 and 14-year-olds said they were Americans by vast majorities. When they finished high school, a majority of them identified themselves as hyphenated Americans. The purpose of the public schools, the original purpose, to turn us into one people has been flipped upside down. And now it is not the melting pot, but balkanization that is taught in the schools. This is the identity politics that we know is the hallmark of the Democrat Party, and I'm afraid our schools are all too complicit in that activity. It's an amazing, amazing fact we have to address. Politically, I thought during the campaign, when I was losing friends fast and furious on my side, Bill, you wrote the Book of Virtues. How can you support this man? I said, well, I have the feeling he's a sinner. And I know you're not. And I know I'm not. I wrote the Book of Virtues, after all. I have to explain that to people all the time. I said this was not written out of strength. This was written out of need. This was written out of aspiration. But I remember telling people, if for no other reason, the kind of people this president will appoint to the Supreme Court. In philosophy, we talk about necessary and sufficient conditions. I said, if you think he's going to appoint a real conservative to the Supreme Court, that is a sufficient condition of voting for him for President of the United States. Especially compared to what we would have gotten on the other team. Oh, great. Great, good, great. He did warm you up for me. Thank you very much. So silly. Anyway, I want to say something about foreign policy. The president just talked about it. I just want to underscore it. He said he was going to destroy ISIS. You know something? He is destroying ISIS. This you will not get in the news. He has done more damage to ISIS in the last 8 months than Obama did in 8 years. He and General Mattis, and I got to tell you, as a Marine father, very proud to have all these Marines surrounding the president. Just gives me a certain security, I think that's good. How about General Kelly yesterday, holding his first press conference? And the press guy said, well, what are the president's main problems? He said, well, you, first of all. Consider these words from a former high-ranking CIA official. The ISIS reign of terror is about to end. It is about to lose its stronghold in Raqqa, Syria, as it lost it in Iraq. The caliphate's days, wrote this gentleman, are truly numbered. James Mattis, General Mattis, said we will annihilate ISIS, and we are doing it. Read the New York Times, I don't say that often, but read the New York Times story on the surrender, the continuing surrender of ISIS prisoners. They are coming with tails between their legs. Of course, most of them, when they're interrogated, say they had just signed up. They've only been on a couple of weeks, don't know anything about beheadings or anything like that. You remember all the Nazis who fought on the Russian front? Yeah, okay. That was the usual excuse. So that, you will remember, is the first responsibility of government, the safety and security of its citizens. He understood the threat of ISIS. He is dealing with it. And that caliphate and the promise of that caliphate is coming to an end. Another sufficient condition for a successful presidency. A few other things. President later will talk about the Iran deal. We'll let him have the thunder on that. But let's pay attention to that. I am so glad he's addressing that. Sophisticated, so-called sophisticated transnational liberals mocked the president when he suggested, who was he to suggest? They said that other members of NATO pay their fair share. And what's happened? They're paying their fair share, a number of them. He took us out of Paris, or at least the Paris Accords, and that was a great accomplishment. He has sent a clear signal to North Korea about what will be tolerated and what not. As to the economy, I remember reading some of these brilliant economists a couple of years ago saying the days of 3% or 4% growth are over. The economy's growing at 3% right now. Stock market keeps hitting all-time highs. And something you may not know, the people who are benefiting the most from this improvement in the economy are the Trump supporters, the workers, the people who get paid by the hour, the people who work on our infrastructure, and that is a just reward for them. He campaigned on a travel ban, and I don't know if you noticed it, but Tuesday, Supreme Court upheld him 8-1. Seems like a long time ago, but remember the first few days, the president approved the Keystone Pipeline and the Dakota Access Pipeline. He's rolled back the EPA's regulatory war on America, and he's ended the war on coal. He has given people in the oil country and in the energy part of our country great encouragement and confidence about the future. He hasn't yet guaranteed that a member of the Big 12 will make it to the college playoffs, which I wish would happen, but just divided the audience. Texas, Oklahoma tomorrow, folks. Go to the conference. I'll watch the game for you. He has appointed, in my view, the most conservative cabinet and list of agency heads that I've ever seen. I know something about it. I was in Reagan's cabinet. That was a pretty conservative cabinet. This is a more conservative cabinet, and that's kind of a stunning thing, since Ronald Reagan is our guiding light, isn't he? He chose a Secretary of Education, my friend Betsy DeVos, who is fighting to empower parents. By the way, Betsy spoke at one of my alma maters, Harvard, a few weeks ago, and students interrupted her speech carrying signs calling her a white supremacist. Do they know what Democrat politics have done to minority students over the years? Kept them trapped in failing schools. She also said, well, I'm a believer in choice, and she got booed. She said, didn't you all make a choice to go to Harvard? Interesting question. Yeah. And were you being anti-public education when you chose to go to a private school like Harvard? Good for Betsy. Good question. Alex Acosta is leading a quiet but very effective revolution at the Department of Labor. He is a very able man. Pay attention to him. Right. Outside the cabinet, important conservatives like the man I met the other day, Ajit Pai at the FCC, he understands rural America and what the needs of rural America are. You know, if you look at it demographically, rural America is becoming the new inner city. We know where Barack Obama wanted money and support to go. Rural America is suffering. It's suffering educationally. It's suffering from this horrible opioid epidemic. It's suffering from all sorts of things. And this administration understands the problems of rural America. I'm delighted to see this gentleman at the FCC, I want to put in a plug for him, understands it as well. And maybe you haven't noticed, but there is great happiness and jubilation in the medical research community at the appointment of Scott Gottlieb at the Food and Drug Administration. This may not, I know this doesn't normally get into our view, but this is a guy who believes that good drugs that look very promising, that show up on research, should be approved and made available to the American people as soon as possible. We now have an administrator at FDA who is friendly to sound and important and worthwhile research and delivering the goods to the American people. I have to say my two favorite little things, being an inside the Beltway guy, are these. He skipped the White House Correspondents' Dinner, God love him. And the Gridiron Dinner. He doesn't need them, and he doesn't want them. He doesn't care about their approval. He's not afraid of the New York Times editorial board or Hollywood. Hollywood? Remember Hollywood? It's going down. Anyway. I mean to say it's been down and now everybody's getting a full good look at it. That's what I mean. Nor does he fear these late-night comedians who, worst of all as comedians, are not funny. As a student of the language, I like the neologisms the president has given us. New terms like drain the swamp. By the way, when our leader here at the Family Research Council came out this morning and the waiters, Tony, I saw him backstage. I said, are the Robertsons not showing? Are you trying to pose as one of the Robertson kids? Anyway, he said no. They drain the swamp. Fake news. It's out there, and it's real. Crooked, you know the rest. Yeah. Rocket Man, I love that one. Rocket Man. But best of all, and most encouraging of all, make America great again. A lot of work to be done. A lot of work to be done, and these accomplishments are real, and they must be accompanied by real and substantial legislative achievements. What a Republican Congress and a president can do must be shown to the American people working together. Let's get this tax thing through. Let us get it through. Let us get it through. It is so important. So these, among other things, I believe are real accomplishments, significant accomplishments. But I know my never-Trumper friends, my Rolodex really got thinner over the last 2 years, still say no to them. And I say, what more do you need to know? Well, they say, what about the tweets? What about the past? What about some of the profanities and vulgarities? To which I say, the president has always had the gift, what Conor Cruz O'Brien said of Edmund Burke, the gift of always being himself. What we get is real. He does not go to us counterfeitly. When you see the president, you see him in fullness. We are conscious of his history. We are conscious of his future. And as Oscar Wilde said, just as every sinner has a future, every saint has a past. Every saint has a past, and every sinner has a future. Let me close with this, because I was thinking, and I wrote this down while he was speaking. One of the president's great current themes, and you see this when he's speaking often, saw it in Harrisburg most recently, and I remind you of this in the form of a question. Did you ever recall seeing Barack Obama give a speech, and the speech being interrupted, third of the way through, halfway through, or at the end, with a crowd shouting, USA, USA? Never. But that's what they do now. The answer is no. The president is making America great again. Let's help him. Let's continue the work that has just begun. Let us support the president in the good works he intends to do for us and our children. Thank you very much.
Morning in America, across the fruited plains.